The U.S. has just flown an entire Patriot missile battalion from the Pacific to the Middle East, over 70 military flights in a matter of days, a massive, under-the-radar deployment that signals Washington is preparing for conflict. At the same time, Iran is threatening to expel UN nuclear inspectors, warning that external threats may force it to take deterrent measures, a clear sign Tehran may soon operate off the grid. So what happens if the U.S. strikes Iran's nuclear sites? In this video, we break down how the attack could start, who gets involved, and just how far the fallout might reach. In the event of war, the U.S. is unlikely to launch a conventional ground invasion. Instead, it would rely on joint military coordination with Israel and precision air power to cripple Iran's capabilities from a distance. Recent joint drills, including U.S. B-52 bombers flying alongside Israeli F-15I and F-35I stealth jets, have laid the groundwork for just such a campaign. If activated, this strategy would target Iran's critical infrastructure, missile bases, naval ports, radar sites, and airfields, neutralizing Tehran's ability to project force. While Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states might quietly offer U.S. forces logistical support or access to regional bases, their appetite for a long-term offensive remains unclear. Most are wary of being dragged into another prolonged conflict. At the same time, Washington would escalate its economic war, tightening sanctions, blocking oil exports, and choking off Iran's already strained economy in a bid to destabilize the regime without a full-scale invasion. But what happens when Iran hits back harder than anyone expects? If attacked, Iran's retaliation will be swift and far-reaching. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, has already identified U.S. and allied military targets across the region. U.S. bases in Iraq, Bahrain, and the Gulf are well within missile range, with Bahrain hosting U.S. Naval Forces Central Command, a primary bullseye. But Iran's response won't end with missiles. Its regional proxy network could be activated almost immediately, unleashing destabilizing attacks across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and even Afghanistan, where remnants of U.S. presence and influence remain. On the economic front, Iran has warned that if its oil exports are blocked, it may retaliate by targeting critical Gulf oil infrastructure and shipping routes, including the Strait of Hormuz, through which roughly 40% of the world's seaborne oil flows. Any disruption there could trigger a global energy crisis within hours. And if the bombs fall near uranium sites, what nightmare are we unleashing? A direct strike on Iran's nuclear sites could have consequences far beyond the battlefield. Qatar's Prime Minister, Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani, has issued a grave warning. An attack on uranium-enriched facilities could entirely contaminate the waters of the Gulf, which millions depend on.
A nuclear weapon is bad for the region, for any country, whether it's Iran or any other country. But also, like when it comes to developing a nuclear program, there are concerns, of course, whenever any nuclear program is developed around your region. And those concerns can be not only military concerns, but also security and safety concerns. That, as I mentioned to you, if the water is contaminated, the nuclear facilities of Iran are on the other side of the coast. It's closer to Doha than Tehran itself. So the risks and the threats is affecting me, my country, affecting other countries.
The use of bunker-busting bombs on uranium-heavy locations could unleash radioactive dust, water contamination, and wind-borne toxins across Qatar, the UAE, and Kuwait, nations already grappling with chronic water scarcity. The humanitarian toll could be catastrophic. Radiation poisoning, the displacement of entire communities, and the collapse of medical and survival infrastructure could overwhelm Iran's capacity to respond. Neighboring countries like Turkey and Pakistan could face a refugee surge, straining border security and humanitarian aid systems. Meanwhile, global trade would grind to a halt, with oil shipments through the Red Sea and Strait of Hormuz blocked. plunging international markets into chaos and threatening energy supplies to Europe and Asia. Even if the fallout settles, can the U.S. or Israel even reach Iran's deepest secrets? Striking Iran's nuclear program isn't as easy as dropping a bomb. Over the past decade, Tehran has hardened and hidden its most valuable sites beneath layers of mountain rock and reinforced concrete. One of its key enrichment facilities is buried deep within the Zagros Mountains, far from aerial surveillance and fortified against sabotage. To reach these bunkers, Israel or the U.S. would need to deploy ultra-heavy bunker-buster bombs like the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, capable of penetrating 200 feet of reinforced earth and steel. Even if these facilities are destroyed, Iran's nuclear scientists, research networks, and technical expertise will survive. The infrastructure may fall, but the knowledge won't. That means a true dismantling of the program would require long-term covert operations, cyber warfare, and diplomatic containment, not just brute force. And if the war doesn't stop there, which countries get pulled into the inferno next? A military strike on Iran could ignite the broader Middle East. Iran has the means and motivation to retaliate across multiple fronts. Jordan could face ballistic missile strikes on its Zarqa oil refinery, a vital national asset. The UAE, still recovering from its Yemen entanglement and with 88% of its population made up of foreign workers, would likely try to avoid direct involvement, but its U.S.-linked infrastructure remains a prime target. Qatar and Oman, which maintain relatively stable ties with Iran, might avoid direct confrontation, but they host major U.S. air bases, and that alone could put them in Tehran's crosshairs. Saudi Arabia, always at odds with Iran, risks attacks on its eastern oil fields and Red Sea shipping routes. The kingdom might even revive internal debates about acquiring nuclear weapons as a deterrent. Meanwhile, Syria and Lebanon could become proxy battlegrounds once again, undoing U.S. gains in those regions and amplifying regional instability. Because Iran's greatest weapon might not be within its borders, it's the network waiting in the shadows. If war breaks out, Iran won't be fighting alone. Backed by its powerful proxy network, the so-called axis of resistance, Iran could unleash coordinated asymmetric warfare across the region. Hezbollah in Lebanon brings a vast arsenal of rockets and experience from the Syrian battlefield. Hamas in Gaza can carry out guerrilla and urban warfare. The Houthis in Yemen threaten Red Sea shipping lanes with drones and anti-ship missiles, while Iraqi Shia militias have a long history of targeting U.S. forces. Together, these groups enable Iran to stretch Israeli defenses, bleed U.S. resources, and ignite multiple fronts simultaneously. And as the Middle East descends into chaos, global powers begin to take sides. As U.S. threats escalate, global power blocks are taking shape. In March 2025, China hosted both Iran and Russia, demanding an end to sanctions and rejecting Western military pressure. This axis of upheaval sees the West's actions as destabilizing and provocative. For China, the concern is energy. It's a major buyer of Iranian oil, and a Middle East war would endanger those flows. Russia, embroiled in its confrontation with NATO, views Iran as a partner against Western influence. Moscow may not send troops, but diplomatic and intelligence support are already in motion. The European Union, meanwhile, remains divided, desperate to avoid an energy crisis while still nominally supporting the 2015 nuclear deal. If one U.S. strike sets this chain in motion, can anyone stop what comes next? If a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities happens, it won't be the end. It may be the beginning. Will this remain a regional flashpoint, or trigger a chain reaction that reshapes the Middle East for decades to come? Hit like, share this video, and subscribe for more in-depth geopolitical breakdowns as the story unfolds.